All right, welcome back, my friends. It is time for another Motorweek Retro Review reaction. This week it is requested by a viewer. This is the 2000 Toyota Avalon road test. Now, this is not actually on, for the first time ever on this channel, this is not on the Motorweek YouTube channel. This is actually coming from somebody else's channel. Makes me a little nervous, but I'm going to provide a link to the original video down below so you can go see it. But I'm going to react to it and tell you what I think of it. So as always, grab your beverage of choice. We got coffee this morning. And let's take a little trip down memory lane because I want to start off with, if you've watched these before, I do not watch these videos in advance. I want you to get a live reaction from me stumbling and trying to think of words and sometimes missing things. Y'all love to point that out. And I've been thinking about the car. And the first generation came out in 95, I think, model year. And it was okay. And later ones are all okay. So looking at the 2001, it's just, my overwhelming opinion is okay. But as I was thinking about it, as I was taking my own little trip down memory lane, I realized I'm extremely frustrated at this car. So let's get into it, and I'll elaborate on that in a little bit.
Davis.
Well, hello and welcome again to Motor Week. We're glad to have you with us. Full-size sedans are supposed to be an American specialty, so you can imagine how surprised many folks were when in 1995 Toyota introduced its big car contender, the Avalon. And while some found the Avalon less than generous in all dimensions, it did strike a positive chord with many former domestic sedan buyers. But never to rest too long on their laurels, for 2000 Toyota is launching a bigger and they claim better Avalon, one with its roots even more firmly planted in American soil.
And yeah, you know, this was usually called the Toyota Buick, right? And it had a reputation for being, let's say, sedate, not terribly exciting in any single way. The second one, you know, let's watch a little bit, and I'll get into my opinions on the styling here. But yeah, it came out, and it basically was like, well, why do I have to have a full-size Ford or a full-size Buick when I can finally have a Toyota? Sold okay.
That's because the all-new 2000 Toyota Avalon has been designed, engineered, as well as built in the good old US of A. In fact, Toyota's plant in Georgetown, Kentucky continues as the only source of Avalons. No global cars this one. So not surprisingly, like its Detroit competition, the Avalon is a pretty big car outside, although not quite full size. Its modified Camry chassis is 191.9 inches in length, riding on an unchanged 107.1-inch wheelbase. But both overall height and width gain an extra inch this year.
And, you know, that's interesting because the Avalon is a pretty big car. It depends on what you're comparing this to, right? I don't know how it stacks up dimensionally to, say, a later Chevy Impala. I think it's probably a little tiny bit smaller, but isn't that where the Japanese made their name, is by being efficient with use of space? So that was never really a downside. And certainly if you're thinking about, you know, the Panther platforms or, you know, the later Chevy Caprices and things like that, this thing's tiny, but much more efficient use of space. Styling-wise, yeah. So I wrestle with this. I'm extremely ambivalent about this car. And I'm like almost aggressively ambivalent about it. I don't hate it in any way. I don't hate the styling. I don't hate the ride. I don't hate anything about it. But it stirs absolutely no passion for me. And that's part of where the frustration, I realized, that I'll talk probably at the end, my final thoughts, is the first one I thought was kind of ugly. This one might be the best looking of the generations of Avalon. And the best it does for me is it's fine. I wouldn't be embarrassed to own one, but I wouldn't necessarily be proud of it. Toyota did an excellent job in the 90s, late 90s, when they started designing this, of drawing a car that looks like a generic car, utilizing all the up-to-date manufacturing and sheet metal bending that they could. It has just enough, the stylists got to be involved just enough to make sure the proportions were right. And I want to credit Toyota for that, because if you think about the Ford 500 that later got renamed to the Taurus, it was a big car, but some of the proportions, like on the headlights, it just went a little wonky. It never really rose to being an attractive car. And this one, they managed to avoid that. In fact, by having the daytime running lights set in a little bit right up against the front grille, there was a hint of Lexus LS in that, but not anywhere else. They created a generic, everyday car that isn't trying to be something else. It's not trying to be sporty. It's not trying to be overly stylish, and it's not trying to be upscale, right? The generation, I think it was the generation after this, in just a few, looking back through history, just a few angles, it looked slightly like some of the early Genesis. This is unpretentious. It is just a car. It is what Toyota has done best in their history in America. Car as appliance. Not the biggest, not the smallest, not the most powerful, not going to handle, it doesn't look the greatest. It just is almost anonymous.
A bigger change is styling, less Camry-derived. It is modern, substantial, fairly handsome, yet still quite conservative. The area around the grille and artful headlamps is the most distinctive. But the interior is very distinctive and the most admirable change for Avalon. With 106.6 cubic feet of interior space, you would split hairs not to call it full size.
I'd like to say, I'm going to back up just a little bit here, just a skosh. I think it's a really attractive interior. Not the most beautiful Japanese interior that they've ever created, but I think this is a really, really good looking interior. And part of that is because of the use of the light colored materials. You know that I love those. And I think it's pretty interesting. They did it right. They've got the instruments right there. But that long eyebrow above it almost reminds me of, say, the W body cars from GM, in the 90s there, early 90s, the Oldsmobile or the Chevy or whatever it is. But this one has just a little bit more style. It has that center console that comes down with what looks like fake wood. But that also, for a car that's not overly large, it manages to give an illusion of width. I'm really nitpicking here, guys, because there's not much I don't like about this interior, just glancing at it here. I drove one of these back in the day, long time ago now. It's unbelievably not memorable, but the interior was nice without being luxurious, and there's no real sense of some weird quirk, some weird ergonomic misstep that annoys you later in ownership. Personally, I mean, if I really, really, really nitpick here, I don't like the gear shift. It looks like a hand with all the fingers cut off of it. But other than that, there's nothing here that's wrong with this interior. This interior speaks to me.
That Toyota found so much room without stretching the wheelbase is truly impressive. As is a dash that would do Lexus proud, blending broad, ultra-clean lines, an efficient layout, and plenty of handsome wood trim. Large, clear analog gauges meet the driver squarely, while to the right is a prominent eye-friendly multi-data screen that looks straight off an auto show concept car. To underscore that the Avalon is aimed at very mature buyers, all is viewed from wide, supportive bench or bucket seats, which in our XLS tester included optional leather upholstery and power adjustments. Side airbags are standard. It's just a short reach to the fine-sounding optional JBL cassette CD stereo and standard dual climate controls. In line with current family car requirements, there's also plenty of storage space and cup holders. Available power points front and rear, plus child seat tether anchors behind the rear seat, which incidentally is big enough for the tallest adults or a lot of kids, but surprisingly lacks a split folding seat back many competitors include. There is a small pass-through for long objects behind the center armrest. Still, the trunk itself offers a family-size 15.9 cubic feet of space. To motivate the 2000.
Oh, before we go on, that's pretty impressive, I'll be honest with you. Everything there, I mean, yes, so the seats are a little flat. You're not going to be auto-crossing this thing. That back seat was huge. I mean, you see how much room he had in front of his knees. I do agree with the comment about not being able to fold down the back seat. I really like that. But what's interesting, when I've bought cars, I have bought cars where I would not consider a car if the back seat didn't fold down. But I can count the number of times I've had to fold down the rear of the back seat of a car, probably on one hand. Not a huge detriment there, especially because that's a very large trunk. That's a really, really good sized trunk. Everything about this car is impressive and well thought out.
2000 Avalon, Toyota went with a proven power plant. The 3-liter dual overhead cam 24-valve V6 is shared with the Camry that makes more horsepower, 210, and more torque, 220 pound-feet, thanks to the addition of variable valve timing. The only transmission available is a smooth, firm-shifting 4-speed automatic. With its front drive combo, the Avalon hits 60 in a respectable 8.5 seconds and runs the full quarter mile in 16.3 seconds at 88 miles per hour. The feel is highly refined with impressive mid-range power for such a smallish V6. Stopping is by way of ABS-equipped 4-wheel disc brakes. Stops from 60, however, were longer than we'd like, averaging 141 feet.
So, let's clump a couple things together here. First off, engine. I respect the engine. That's good enough power. 0 to 60, 8.5 seconds is totally fine. It strikes me as a small engine. Certainly, if I'm thinking that a mid-size car should have something in the 3.5, 3.8 liters, that strikes me as a little small, but it performs absolutely as expected. And again, I would have no real concerns that a 3-liter making 210 horsepower is going to be overly stressed. It's fine. It's another example of it's fine. Braking, not fine. That's kind of long. 141 feet. That is very unimpressive. The lack of drama in stopping, that's good. That's a good, safe stop. But 141 feet, not horrible. I'm not, again, it wouldn't stop me from buying the car. It's just like, that's a little underwhelming.
Brake assist, a system that keeps brake pressure on in a panic stop even if you chicken out, is included with optional electronic stability skid control on the Avalon XLS. Both unexpected features for this class of sedan. Traction control is included too, all working with the Avalon's already capable McPherson strut front and dual-link strut rear suspension.
You know, I want to say here real quick, two things just jumped out at me. Number one is, I know this platform is shared with the Lexus ES, which is an extremely good car, but much hated, I think, by people who drive more aggressively. People who are attracted to sporty Genesises or BMWs or even Audis, they don't like the Lexus. So I know it shares a platform with the Lexus ES, but certain angles on this car, there's a little GS in it. Around the taillights here, I don't love the rear end of it. It's like triangular taillights done wrong almost, but it's okay. Again, it's just solidly okay. But with the backup lights cut into the trunk like that, and then certain angles where you're looking down the side of it up towards the trunk, there's a little Lexus GS in this. Obviously, I think some of the design people probably worked on both projects.
for a solid, sure-footed, confident feel. It's no sports sedan and there is plenty of front-drive push, yet Avalon feels very safe for such a big, comfy car. But push it too far, too fast, and it will snap from understeer to oversteer very quickly. Though that's not a situation likely to be encountered by Avalon's mostly older drivers. They will instead favor a moderate pace at all times, reveling in the car's luxurious ride and well-isolated quiet. A feeling of calm reinforced by the knowledge that they've got plenty of car for their money. Avalon prices start at $26,470 for an XL model with a front bench seat. $25,650 gets you the bucket seats.
I don't remember that they offered a bench seat. Okay, maybe I do remember. I don't remember it on this generation. That was a surprise. I don't want another one, but that was a surprise.
Move up to the XLS and you'll pay $30,110 for one with the bench seat, $30,210 for buckets. While more than most competitors such as the Buick LeSabre and Chrysler Concorde, it still represents a much better value than the first Avalon, and one that makes you wonder why anyone would pay more for a Lexus ES300. Which means that the Avalon's already respectable sales will certainly go up. Automobile Magazine agrees, saying, Toyota wants to sell 80,000 Avalons this year, and we have no doubt it will. So expect to see a lot more of this high-value, homegrown, big family sedan in the near future. As we said before, full-size sedans are an American specialty, and the 2000 Toyota Avalon is as American as any big car on the road today.
First, let's answer the question, why would anyone pay more for the ES? Well, that's because styling, number one, and if nothing else, dealership experience. And I think Lexus offers a longer warranty. Number two, basically everything about this car is pretty impressive, not the price. And this is where I'm really wrestling here. On the one hand, this car, if you painted it white and you put a UPC symbol on it, it would be generic car, like the great value car, right? There's nothing there, and that's not its purpose. It's not a sports sedan, and thankfully, it's an honest car. It's competent at everything it does. One of my commenters on the channel the other day said, we were talking about something else, some other car, and was like, solid, this is what Toyota does. They do solid B's to B pluses. And that's how this kind of feels to me. Good use of space, not overly large, engine's fine, transmission's fine, dash looks great. It just does everything well without blowing you away. And that's what a lot of buyers want. I just want a competent car that doesn't have any glaring flaws, that also is going to be reliable for the long term. I'll tell you what I think. I think the Avalon is one of the best used cars you can buy, just like a Camry or an Accord or something like that. If you need something a little bit more spacious, this is an excellent used car. And I appreciate Toyota's restraint. I really want to give them all the props here that they designed a good chassis, a good engine, a good transmission, a beautiful interior. It gave it, good use of space, what Japanese manufacturers have been really good at, all wrapped into a package that is not hideous, but is not trying to be something it's not. It's not trying to kill the Maxima. It's not trying to move into Lexus territory or go up against a Mercedes. It's just car. And here's what frustrates me, is after I say all of that, when I was thinking about the Avalon and my feelings towards the Avalon, because I've thought about them a few times, every 5 or so years, I'm like, what about the Avalon? I kind of miss my larger cars. And I keep thinking maybe I'd be happy in a large car. Well, we don't have the Impala anymore. We don't have the old Panther platform anymore, and the Avalon is now gone too, and it steadily became more expensive. But I just couldn't do it. And part of it has always been the styling. Either they were too generic or they were trying too hard. Some of the later ones really didn't resonate with me. Styling, Toyota's styling went sideways for almost all of their models. And the later ones just didn't really resonate with me, so I bought something cheaper. This one I think is the best of them. I really do. I think the interior is great, and I think the exterior is just fine the way it is, but it's frustrating because Buick was making some really attractive cars. But the Avalon's the one that is so generic, it's heralded for it. I'm frustrated that Toyota goes out and designs one of the most generic cars. They do it very well, don't get me wrong, but designs one of the most generic cars. And they're heralded for it. Whereas Buick was over here trying to design better looking cars with more style and more flair, and they struggled. It seems sometimes unfair to American manufacturers that this is assumed to be great because it's generic, whereas the American manufacturers have to try harder and are criticized for it along the way. Would I trust this over a contemporary Buick of the same time? Absolutely. Would I rather be seen in a Buick of that era? Like, I guess they had the Regal. Did they have the LaCrosse then at the time? I'd rather be seen in the Buick. But this is a very, very good car that, honestly, I like. There's nothing else really to say about it. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you how I feel about this. I did a retro review reaction several weeks ago of a 87, if I remember, Nissan Stanza. And at the time, I think I said something along the lines of, this is if you went and designed a generic Japanese sedan, it would look just like this Stanza. And that's how I feel about the Avalon. If you took the resources and designed a generic Japanese sedan for the year 2000, using all the advanced manufacturing you could and styling, and this one having an American touch, I think it would look like this Avalon. Good car. Potentially a great car. Fabulous used car if you need something that size. But a little frustrating to me. I think it's a little underappreciated for how good it really was, and it makes me frustrated that the American manufacturers fell so far in 20 years to this point that Toyota can come out with something unbelievably generic while the Americans have to try so much harder and they aren't given credit for it. That's my opinion. Let me know what you think below, guys. I appreciate you being here.